Yeah, so the concept of wonder and how it sits at the confluence of both reason and feeling. So I thought, this being a critical rationalist talk, Popperian meetup, I thought I'd try and solve a problem. And that's what I've got like a rough sketch idea of. And it's quite an old and overtrodden problem that I've got an idea for. I'm using the framework from Popper and Deutsch of a clash of two separate ideas that are incongruent with one another. They don't fit. So that's the problem. And I first became aware of this problem when sort of vibes amongst the community between fans of David Deutsch in the beginning of Infinity, between the more STEMmy side and the more humanities side, his appeals to like the sort of Carl Sagan wonderment and the humanities, and then his more like hard physics and STEMmy sides like that. So I think there's an interesting tension there. And this is also mirrored in basically my entire, hello, that's me, my entire like intellectual and educational history. So I didn't know whether I wanted to do STEM or humanities, and I think school unfairly and unnecessarily like cast a divide between those two. So I did end up going to STEM. I'm currently an industrial geologist. I work in Australia, but I do love humanities, and I love poetry and literature and art, and I think these things, there isn't such a sharp divide. And I think from this position, we can, so I've taken a lot to solve here. I think my potential new theory can reconcile all of these things broadly into four categories. So there's reason, passion, thought, feeling, logic, instinct, sense, and sensibility. This is the cold, hard side, the cerebral side of the mind, and the feeling side of the mind. And also, so applied, that's science and art, and industry and nature. And then it might shed some light on the difference between utility and beauty, and function and form, as well as the universal and the individual, and potentially even masculine and feminine. So you might see the contours of a superset of ideas here between the blue and the red. So this is what I'm trying to reconcile today. This is the problem, the two ideas I'm trying to contend and potentially find a solution for, the Enlightenment and Romanticism. So it's going to go through the history of these ideas and see what we can do. So what is the solution? This is my broad sketch of a philosophy I'm trying to develop called WONDERISM. I think this is where the confluence of reason and feeling is wonder. So let's do a quick history of the ideas here. So on the top, you'll see some Enlightenment figures, and on the bottom, you'll see some Romantic figures. It's interesting immediately to think, where is the conflict between these characters? I mean, we can do a fun game here if you want to try. Do you think we can name from like top right on the Enlightenment? Do we know who that is? Okay, so we'll go from left first. Boom, yeah, correct. Yep. So Rousseau is down here, actually, that's Descartes, and then Newton and Hume. Pardon? Oh, yeah, true that. Little laser dude. Okay, yeah, so this is, I'll rush through these guys. So this is Rousseau, and it's an interesting point here with the overlap, right? Rousseau is considered to be both a Romantic and an Enlightenment figure. And then this is Goethe, who's most famous for writing Faust, but also he was a very famous polymath. He advanced some of Newton's theories on optics, and he was a geologist. I actually work at a manganese mine, and we have a rock, it's an iron oxide called goethite, named after Goethe. And then these three here are poets you might recognize. This is Samuel Taylor Coleridge, who wrote Kubla Khan and the Rime of the Ancient Mariner. This is William Blake, and we're going to have a little mini case study between William Blake and Newton, because they're an interesting pairing there. And this is William Wordsworth. So those three are like the older of the big six Romantic poets. So we will start with the easier one to characterize, which is the Enlightenment. And the fact that it's easier to characterize is almost a feature of its content, right? So the Enlightenment is known as the Age of Reason. And during this time, they were coming from a a time of traditions, static traditions, lots of anti-rational memes during this time. These are ideas that weren't criticized. However, the Age of Reason and the Scientific Enlightenment, the Renaissance, set out to deconstruct and destroy the structures of superstition and religious dogma. You can think about, I'm blanking now, who's a heliocentric guy? Anyway, yeah, thank you very much. I think the best characterization of the Enlightenment, and this is the Western tradition more broadly, comes from the Romanticist scholar Isaiah Berlin, and he characterized the Enlightenment as three main premises. That one, all genuine questions can be answered. I do have the full, this is from a lecture series he had. I do have his full thing, he expands on this, but I think for time, I'll just go through them quickly. So all genuine questions can be answered. In Berlin's view, if a question can't be answered, and this is reflecting of the Western view, if a question can't be answered, then it's not a valid question. It doesn't make sense, it's not. And then all these answers are knowable. We may be ignorant. One person may not know an idea, but there is potentially someone in the world who does. And also, if no one knows, there could be someone born next year, 100 years in the future, that can know these questions. And three, that all these answers have to be compatible with one another. One true statement logically has to align with another true statement. Of course, we're fallible in these, like the relationship between knowledge and truth. However, there is one truth and it is compatible. So this is the Western tradition boiled down to three premises, and I think that's very illuminating. There's also an important distinction to be made between two separate branches of the Enlightenment, where this is the historian Roy Porter. I really recommend, he has a really great lecture on, basically he's talking about his book here, The Creation of the Modern World. Deutsch has tweeted it a few times. He prioritizes the Dutch Anglosphere Enlightenment over the continental one, because the continental one is basically utopianist. Rousseau and some of the German figures thought that pure reason alone, reasoning from certain axioms, could have us create this perfect world. And it was revolutionary and violent in the case of the French Revolution. Unfortunately, both of these strands were empiricist and inductivist. This is obviously a pre-Popperian world. So they were laboring under the two of the same mistakes, but as we see here, they are all fallible, so we'll let them off. We'll give them that one. So that's important to consider, and also I'll just go back quick, sorry. It's important to think Romanticism as a movement congruent and somewhat slightly following the Enlightenment. Which one do we think it came out of? I've got my eyes on this guy over here. So, Romanticism was generally thought, and I won't read this all out to you, but it was generally thought to be more of a, and I thought this when I started reading about it, was a artistic movement. So Romanticism is above all the movement of ideas, the ideas of a revolution and the ideas of nationalism, the preposterous suggesting that women, slaves, and even animals might have rights. It continues, it continues. However, the Romantic Age was characterized by a connection between the aesthetic and the rhetorical, the argumentative. So content and form were intertwined. I think this is an interesting comparison here in terms of prose style and how that operates with philosophy. So this is, I think you might all recognize this guy on the right. However, Ralph Waldo Emerson, he's often considered the father of American literature. He's also my favorite prose writer. His sentences, man. Read his essay on love, and you'll fall in love with love. However, it's interesting to compare these two because they're both essayists. Popper, in my his writing, he writes manuals. In my opinion, the content is incredible, and he's an incredible philosopher. But it's very simple, clear, cut back. It's for clarity. That's his whole spiel, right? He says that no one can speak without being misunderstood. but he gets pretty damn close to being so clear. Whereas Emerson is his essays almost veer on poetry, they're prose poetry. And I think there's an interesting difference here between what you feel while reading them, which is going to be a recurring theme here. And I put this slide in here because, simply for the fact that I like Bertrand Russell, and I think we might all have this book on our bookshelves and maybe have never picked it up. I only recently picked it up because it had a chapter on Romanticism. So I should like to say two things. One intellectual and one moral. That is, I'm so sorry. So he characterizes it between passion and the aesthetic. So this is art and feeling again. Okay, so we turn to Isaiah Berlin, and this is the inversion of the Enlightenment picture. Berlin characterizes the Romanticism as a rejection of Enlightenment rationality. Some questions cannot be answered. Therefore, some answers are unknowable, and therefore not all answers are compatible with one another. This is the romantic philosophical rebuke of Enlightenment rationality, which is false. In my conception, I think everyone here will agree with me. Are we at an impasse between these two? It would seem so that they are antonyms, they are rejections of one another. However, I think there is a solution, which is wonderism. So why wonder? Well, for two reasons. There are two types of wonder. Following Edmund Burke, and later Kant, they both wrote treatises on the sublime and beautiful. And sublimity is a very interesting concept. Beautiful is thought to be small, delicate, and yeah, that's like, beauty is like prettiness. Whereas the sublime is large and powerful, it approaches the infinite. And the emotional response to the sublime is astonishment. As this is Kant, the sublime moves, the beautiful charms, the one produces a feeling of admiration and respect, the other of love. Sublimity must always be large, beauty can also be small. But there is another way we say the word wonder. So you wonder at a giant cliff, but you also wonder, how did that cliff get there? If you're a geologist, perhaps. So this comes from Plato. So another definition of wonder is curiosity, and mystery is its obverse side there. So this is a great quote from Plato. In wonder all philosophy began. In wonder it ends. But the first wonder is the offspring of ignorance. The last is the parent of adoration. And this contains within it both meanings of wonder. It begins with the question mark, and it ends with the exclamation point. Ignorance and adoration. So we can view this as a process. And we can view curiosity as the wonderist evaluation of problems, mysteries, and questions. And then on the other side, adoration is solutions, discoveries, and answers. And this is sort of, it approaches a phenomenology of problem solving. This is how it feels to do it. And we can say this is a, problems create more, solutions create more problems. Time? Oh, okay. So it approaches infinity if, of course, we don't destroy ourselves, etc., etc. So you go from curiosity to adoration and again and again and again. And I think this is nicely summarized in these poetic lines. And I want to wonder here, as pilgrims do, which is movement, and wonder here, as children do, which is feeling, and wonder what is made when the coast meets the ocean. That's thinking. And I'd be surprised if anyone know who this poet. It's your boy. This is also a somewhat, it's my case for a utilitarian argument for art. A lot of artists take a lot of pride in art having no utility. We do it because we love it, and there's no other reason why we should. However, I think this is selling art and feeling short. I think there is a massive utility, like a mimetic quality to art and feeling, which is very nicely summarized by this Victorian poet Gerard Manley Hopkins, in this, literally the first line here, the fine delight that fathers thought, feeling creates thinking. And then it ends with, leaves yet the mind a mother of a mortal song. I think when you feel an idea and it resounds within you, it helps for memory and it helps for creativity building on that. So it's an interesting point actually, it's a bit of a reach really, but I think this is interesting to consider with the AGI debate and can thinking agents be not conscious? Because if you had no internal qualia, you could not be left with a mind of, of a mortal song. You couldn't have the fine delight that fathers thought. You might have a cognitive block there. So yeah, the utility of wonder is inspiration. So a short history of wonderism. I was in New York 2 days ago. That's St. Patrick's Cathedral. I took that photo. And I think the best example of this is the Hagia Sophia in Istanbul, is this like astonishment, this wonder that you feel from the beauty. And it's historically been applied for religious dogmas. It's pretty much the main reason. You go to a church, the acoustics, the architecture, and you feel at one with God. Jordan Peterson makes the argument that we couldn't have ever done that architecture without literal supernatural, inspiration. I think that's false, because I don't think there is the supernatural. This is all sort of the misfiring of human creativity. So it's interesting to think what the firing of human creativity would be. Before we get there, very quick little 3 minutes. We'll skip these guys. Blake versus Newton. Blake was a bit of a mentalist, actually. He saw prophetic visions of angels since he was a child, and he hated Newton. He drew him like this, and this is him with his little compass, and he is dissecting the world. This is from Wordsworth. We murder to dissect. This is a criticism of rationality. And you can compare this with the creation of Adam, which is a much more exalting picture, but we'll skip this. And it culminates with this famous painting of Blake's, The Ancient of Days, which is, again, it's God himself. This is a character in Blake's mythology called Urizen, or your reason. He's like, it's your reason, it's not my reason. This is a criticism, this is not exalting of reason. Here is Ben, he's in the and this is Jesse's house with the Urizen. And again, in New York, there is another rendition in an Art Deco style. We'll go through Newton. Newton's actually an interesting character because he's considered to be the Enlightenment figure, but he is, the year of wonders is 1666. It aligns so well. Like, this is the year that he created calculus and the theory of gravitation in 1 year, because he was seconded for the plague. And in the future, okay, so this is one of the main points, right? I'll just read this tweet to you. The thing that distinguishes wonder, grounded in reason, is its capacity to create newer, truer, greater wonders in the future. Primitive superstitions, with all their sincere yet static beauties, could never have done this. Only modern Western explanatory wonderism could have. And these are videos of deaf people hearing. If you watch these videos, they just make me cry. So yeah. This is a summary here. So the Enlightenment says, don't feel, think. Romanticism says, don't think, feel. Wonderism says that in order to think, we must feel, and in order to feel, we must think. And these are my takes for the 7 modern wonders of the world. So you've got the SpaceX, you can choose your poison there with the Witch rocket. You've got the ISS, which is incredible. I love the Orb. Las Vegas in general, an entire city dedicated to exhibition, is incredible. The footprint on the moon. Burke writes about how the sublime doesn't have to be large in physicality. It can be small and represent something large, which I think the footprint does. This is the entire Netherlands here, by the way, which wouldn't exist without modern wonderist technologies. The Empire State Building, we can replace that with the Burj Khalifa if you want, but I think this is more iconic. Just any tall tower is incredible. And Mars, which alludes to space travel again. Yeah, boom. I think we have 5 minutes for questions,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
excellent. Sam. Sorry, say again?
It's nice that you included the Netherlands, it's always appreciated.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, there's a great quote where it's like, this is not soil, it is the blood and sweat of men. Yeah, yeah.
Yes. But so the actual question is, don't you think that what the romanticists are trying to do is just inherently too evil to even make sense of? I mean, like, I appreciate your attempt. I think
No, I agree there's some horrible stuff that needs to be thrown out, like there's like misanthropy embedded in its naturalism. Its rejection of rationality is horrific and terrible. It's both simultaneously relativist and authoritarian, which is fun. But what they do get right is they value feeling. So feeling is good. This is my whole thesis, right? We need feeling, and feeling is, yeah, it's what it's all about. So we want to conserve that. So they were right. Like, you know, Blake had horrible content, but he was an incredible artist. And I think you can say those things at the same time. Yep.
Is it accurate to say that the Enlightenment figures didn't value feeling, or isn't focused on it?
Well, this is a good point. I don't think any one person is perfectly. I think it's impossible to live without feeling, right? So you think about Alexander Pope was the poet of the Enlightenment, and he certainly had feeling in his poetry.
I guess a lot of the Romantics would actively write about the problems with reason, but I don't know if there's Enlightenment thinkers who would actively write about the problems with feeling. They're just writing about mechanics and calculus.
They were explicitly rationality over feeling. It was they saw that as an irrationality. So. Cool. I think we are done. Thank you very much.